Okay, now I think I'm going to real quickly go over my method for synchronizing my Obsidian vaults across all my systems. So I personally like to use a utility called Syncthing. When I first set it up, I was having a lot of problems and I thought it was quite unintuitive if I'm being perfectly honest. So I thought I'd show kind of how it's done and what I find to be somewhat of a correct way to do it. So basically, you download Syncthing, install it as you'd expect, and then I'm just gonna launch it real quick. And then once it's installed, then it should just pop right up. And I personally set a username and password. So this is kind of what the interface looks like. So in this example, I actually need to synchronize my Obsidian Vault with this computer since I reinstalled Windows. So I'm gonna kind of do that as a demo to show how I set that up. So first of all, I have Syncthing on here. Then I want to get Syncthing on this machine as well. Right now I have some AutoHotkey scripts that basically open and close Syncthing since it's kind of buried in the program files and stuff. It just runs the executable more or less. That's not really relevant to setting up Syncthing, but I just want to show that's what it does. So I double click it and then Syncthing will launch on this device as well. To clarify real quick, I created that AutoHotkey script to be triggered by my Minecraft voice assistant. The setup for the username and password I think is relatively intuitive. But here, let's set that. And I set my username and password on here as well. I don't have any folders on here. So how do I add my Obsidian Vault? Well, the first thing I would do is, this is going to sound crazy, but I would actually create an empty folder for whatever I want to synchronize. So basically this is the source device. This is my destination device. So on that destination device, I'm going to create a folder for whatever I want to synchronize, like my Obsidian Vault, for example. So if you have an existing folder on the system, you want it to be empty, because otherwise there's going to be all these weird conflicts that'll come up. At least that's how it was in my experience. If you have an existing folder, I would put it somewhere else and then create an empty folder where you want it to be synchronized from the source system. And if you have things on the destination and different things on the source, I would recommend loading stuff from the source and then merging the differences on the destination once you have the source loaded. So yeah, I just created this folder right here. So the next step is actually going to be on our source machine. We're going to want to add the folder we want to synchronize. So we basically specify a folder path. The folder I want to synchronize is this one right here. So I'm just going to shift right click and then click copy as path, which is right here. Then I'm going to go to the folder path and then just paste it there. I'm going to remove the quotes even though it might not be necessary. I'm going to create a label that makes sense to me, probably like my Obsidian. You might want to have certain folders not go through. So for example, if I synchronize it with my Mac, I have certain keyboard shortcuts that use the control key. If you load that vault onto the Mac automatically remaps it to command whatever. So anything that's currently control O suddenly gets remapped to command O. And it actually changes the files, so if I were to synchronize it back to the Windows system, it's all screwed up. Or at the very least, going back to Mac will screw it up again. And then I manually remap it to control whatever. That works, but it's a pain to do that. So the shortcut files is actually stored in the .obsidian folder right here. What I like to do is just ignore the .obsidian folder. because the hotkeys are stored in here, I believe. I don't want that going through. So I'm just going to check this, click save, and then I can add ignore patterns. You basically just specify paths. So if I want, this is the root folder right here. So everything is relative from there. So if I don't want the .obsidian folder, I literally just say .obsidian. That's the syntax for it. And if let's say I just didn't want hotkeys, then I would do .obsidian / hotkeys. And it might actually be \. I can't remember how it is in Windows. It's probably / because it's universal across all systems. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's either / or /. I just double checked. It is in fact /. But I'm going to do the whole .obsidian folder. So I basically want everything but that. If I'm going from Windows to Windows, it's not a big deal. But if I'm going from Windows to Mac, that's what I'm going to do. It'll do everything but my hotkey, so it doesn't mess with that. And then it does very quick synchronization, so that's actually quite convenient. So then I hit save. So now the next step is to get it on this destination machine right here. So the next step is to set up sharing on the source machine. So edit, go to sharing. Oh, then I think you have to add the device too. That's actually the first step. So add remote device, and it will probably automatically detect it if it's on the same network. Otherwise, you can probably do it some other way. So I would name it Nook or whatever I want to name the device. And then I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by also selecting the folder I want to share all in one go. Then I hit save. So now I come on to that. I was kind of expecting it to pop up some share message, which it's not. Let's try that again. So I'm gonna save it without that. Then I'm gonna try to add it again. Well, so much for killing 2 birds with 1 stone, huh? And now if I come on to the destination machine, I get that new device pop up right there. Then I just want to click add device. This is how I add the device first of all. I'm just going to call this main PC. Save that. And then now the actual folder shows up. So I can just click add. The path is that empty folder that I created just a little bit ago on the desktop. Right here. So I'm just going to right click, copy as path again, paste that in. Probably delete the quotes, but it might be fine if you leave it. So that's where it's going to go. And then I'd probably add the same ignore patterns if I'm going to use that at all. I'm not going to worry about it here. So then I just click save. And then it synchronizes all those changes automatically. And it's going to take longer the first time than any other time, because in the future it's just going to do changes since the last synchronization. So there's all the files right there. So if I already had a folder that had different stuff, I would probably merge those changes at this point, and then it'll get synced back to the source machine. So let's do a test and see if it really works. So I'm going to add the vault that I just backed up. Right there. And for some reason it didn't truly recognize a vault because none of my plugins are being registered. Sometimes a plugin properly register, other times it doesn't. I should not have ignored the .obsidian folder most likely. I would include it at the initial setup. Then once it's set up, then you can ignore it later if needed. That's worked pretty well for me in the past. It might register if I were to put it in a standalone folder or something, like Obsidian. The only thing to keep in mind is we have to update the changes on Syncthing if we were to move it over. That could cause a little bit of complication. If you change the location, I'd probably delete the folder, then re-add it at that point. Always back up your Syncthing folders on the source when troubleshooting and messing with that stuff. You could inadvertently delete something on the source or vice versa. I speak from personal experience and it can be tricky. Fortunately, I'm good with my backups, or I would have been pretty screwed there. It can be a bit of trial and error, but should eventually work correctly going through that. But yeah, I mean, just know that if I make any changes here, they will show up on this machine and vice versa. It does work pretty well. The only other thing to keep in mind is on Mac or Linux, I find that sometimes Obsidian doesn't have permission to do a given thing. And that's because of the ownership. So I would run a chown with your username if that happens. That tends to fix it for me most of the time. I usually do chown -R, my username, colon, and then that folder. It'll recursively do everything in there. And then I might also have to do chmod or change mode and add basically all the privileges for users. So I'd probably do like 744, which will do read, write, execute for all users, read for groups and everybody else. And that seems to work fine most of the time. So if there's permission issues, run those commands. I've had to do it on multiple occasions, but it does fix it each time. Kind of a pain, but that's how I would use Syncthing. So I mainly just wanted to go over basically some of the differences and just how to set up Syncthing because I found it quite unintuitive. So I just wanted to show my process of getting it set up because it does work pretty well now that I've established the process. So yeah, that's how I set up Syncthing.